The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
I saw a pale horse.
The beast.
We're told in the book of Revelation.
This is not a human child.
Isn't an angel?
Satan.
Armageddon is almost upon us.
Order the use of nuclear weapons.
The world is a fine place and worth fighting for.
From one end of the world to the other, I will oppose you.
They're here.
Welcome to the end of the world.
Wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. This is P.I.D. Radio.
From a secure facility on a ridge high above the Missouri Ozarks, greetings and welcome to P.I.D. Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and welcome to our humble bunker today. We are guarded by the Dachshund.
Yes, there is no finer security system money can buy.
Try getting past that, buddy. If you don't bring snacks, you're not getting in. And if you do bring snacks, well, hey.
Welcome.
Welcome. What would you like today?
Well, today is April the 8th, 2018, and we are glad to be back after a couple of weeks away.
We are. We had a good time.
Yeah, down in Dallas for the Hear the Watchman Conference, and we'll have news about the next Hear the Watchman Conference, which will take place in 2018. Some exciting stuff going along with that one as well. And another conference, too. So we got a couple of
conferences. Crazy. It's 2018 is a conference kind of year.
Conferences wall to wall.
Conference con.
That's it. A conference of conferences. Oh, wow.
Conferences.
Pending.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what all is going on? Well, we're just a month away, less than a month away now from our trip to Israel, and just over a month away from the 70th anniversary of Israel's Declaration of Independence, the restoration of the state of Israel.
Yeah, I know. We'll see what what happens when we actually get there. Gilberts have landed. Get out! Get out! Suddenly sirens go off.
They didn't bring the dachshund. No!
They brought a large shampoo.
Is this 3 ounces or less? No, it is not. And yet, here we are.
That is one of the wonderful Trey Smith stories that we've heard since his visit to Israel.
Trey Smith tells a story about how when he and Rick Derringer,
Rick Derringer, the musician,
rock and roll hoochie coo, Rick Derringer, hang on Sloopy, Rick Derringer, who is now a Bible believing, saved Christian,
amen,
who will be doing some. In fact, they met through Casper McLeod, and he'll be doing some musical ministry together with Casper in this year. In fact, according to the email that was sent out recently, Derringer said that in the late 70s, he had wanted to hire Casper to be a part of his band. But Casper was already committed to other things and was on the verge of what could have become a hit, a very big career as a pop star. I mean, if you look at Casper's hair today,
it's pretty much the way it looked back in the day.
30 years ago, yeah. But it works for him.
It does. Actually, it does.
Yeah, and in the 1980s, where you had a lot of the so-called hair bands that were making it really big thanks to MTV, Casper would have been one of those guys. But he chose Jesus over secular music, as you did, Sharon, when you were offered an opportunity to go on tour to open for George Jones.
Yeah, back in the day.
When George was, all that at the top of the country charts. So anyway, Rick Derringer went to Israel with Trey Smith last year. Trey's got a video out on that called Israel. And some interesting stuff in the video. But one of the stories Trey tells is when they got to the airport at Tel Aviv, because Trey was trying to get a drone into the country so he could take aerial pictures. Now, look, Israel has to be very, very concerned about security because of all the stuff going on. The Palestinians are still trying to make trouble. In fact, as we're recording this weekend, I didn't look to see what was going on, but they were threatening another march on the border at Gaza. So we'll have to take a look at that as we do this broadcast. But the drone was in his suitcase, and the customs officer was inspecting his suitcase for contraband, for stuff that shouldn't have been there. And, let's be honest, Trey looks a little wild. His hair is a little wild and out there. And so, maybe they pulled him aside for that, or maybe this is standard procedure. We'll find out when we go to Israel next month. But the guy immediately focused on the bottle of shampoo, which was larger than the 3 ounces allowed on international flights. So, this shampoo, is this less than 3 ounces?
You do that really well, but honestly, Trey tells it better.
He tells it better. I know. It's watching Trey tell it is really a scream. And it's well, no, sir. I'm sorry, it's not. Yet here we are having this conversation.
So we're going to pray that we manage to make it in without,
But the funny part is that the shampoo was right next to the drone.
Exactly. He missed the drone. The Lord allowed the drone in because of the shampoo.
An 8-ounce bottle of shampoo. Is this less than 3 ounces? No, it is not.
And Trey got some wonderful footage with that drone.
Yes,
so
he did.
Praise God. We're really looking forward to that trip. Well, I'm looking at the news, and I think the demonstrations have continued, but apparently a gentleman was shot dead. This is from the Washington Post 22 hours ago. Says that his vest marked him as part of the press, so I don't really know what happened there. Yeah, it's a powder keg there now.
Yeah.
In fact, much of the world is a powder keg right now. Even though you're not hearing all about it, if you actually read European and other world websites, if you go beyond what is mainstream news here in the United States and actually read international news, you'll see stuff that is just not reported here, as if it doesn't happen.
Yeah. We are so fixated on, frankly, porn stars.
And Russia, which is most of the MSN is reporting still to this day.
We are missing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of a lot of things happening out there that are disturbing, and we're missing it here in the U.S. because it's apparently the media forgot that reality television is something that Donald Trump did before he became president, and now we'd like actually some real reality in our news gathering, but we're not getting that, sadly. They've continued on with the reality TV coverage of the Trump campaign and Trump presidency.
Yeah.
A couple of things. There was the big caravan of migrants that were headed for the U.S. border. They were still in far southern Mexico, but the fact that you had 1,200 people walking through Mexico without Mexico doing anything to stop it was disturbing. President Trump did something that I'm detecting as a pattern in his presidency. He seems to recognize, and I hope this is true, because, and I say I hope because I just saw a headline here I'm going to have to dig into a little bit, that he's threatened Russia and Assad again over a chemical attack, which may or may not have been launched.
I'm looking at that story right now. Doesn't suffocate as Syria's government is accused of a chemical attack. The White House has already condemned this.
Yeah. This was late on Saturday, 49 people dead. This according to the Syrian American Medical Society. Others are putting the death toll at more than 150.
This comes not that long after the White House announced that we, the United States, were going to build a base in Syria.
Well, that report was according to Sputnik News.
Okay, so we don't know that it's actually true.
Right. And this is one of the things, and let me finish up the Mexico thing real quick, because it's not strictly Mexico. It also relates to China and North Korea. Trump seems to understand that our military is not the leverage that we use to accomplish foreign policy goals. The military is what we use to kind of enforce the leverage, which is economic. Economic leverage. You notice that after he threatened, he said, look, NAFTA is on the table. This was a week ago. NAFTA is on the table, as well as the foreign aid that we've been giving Honduras and other countries that are allowing these migrants to leave their country and basically sending their problems to North America, sending their problems to the United States, rather.
Right.
Which the United States has been used as a safety valve for the social problems of Mexico and Central America for quite some time. But when the president put those on the table, said, look, we'll just pull out of NAFTA, we'll kill that, which Mexico has used to great advantage since it was signed by Bill Clinton. We'll put foreign aid on the table for Honduras and other nations. Suddenly, Mexico said, okay, we're going to break up the caravan and send those people home. The people who are at risk, like pregnant women and people with disabilities, they can stay, but everyone else is going to have to apply, and we may just send them all home.
Well, the people in the caravan are saying that they're coming anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll see, because Mexico said that they're going to break them up and send them back. So But a similar thing happened with North Korea, because the United States imposed stronger economic sanctions on the North Korean regime, which not only affected North Korea, but it also impacted China. And you'll note that those sanctions went through the UN Security Council without any veto, because the U.S., Russia, China, Britain, and France all have veto power in the Security Council. Any one of those 5 nations can kill anything in the Security Council, but Russia and China did not. And I think it's because the United States is saying, hey, look, we've got a $600 billion trade imbalance or something with China. And so if we this is something else, too, that pundits have been freaking out about, the so-called trade war that Trump has launched with the Chinese. Well, the fact is, we import way more of their stuff than they import of ours. So if they're slapping tariffs on stuff that we're sending to China, whoop-de-doo, we still come out ahead. And there's another reality here that the Chinese, I'm sure, are aware of, is that they cannot support themselves. They need to import raw materials and export finished goods in order to continue to keep their society economically viable enough to prevent a revolution. Whereas here in the U.S., we actually have enough here where we could be self-sufficient if we wanted to be.
And we need to get back to that, because my guess is that there are lobbies right now in the White House and in Congress saying, no, we buy a lot of our products that we sell to American consumers at a discount from China.
Right, and that's the thing to remember. When you hear all of these protests from pundits, talking heads, the head of the United States Chamber of Commerce, just remember that they represent vested interests who have a financial stake in maintaining the status quo, because they benefit from the trade imbalance. You and I don't benefit.
No.
But they do. And so these globalists, like Gary Cohn, who just resigned as the economic advisor, a lot of the pundits that you see on CNBC and other, Bloomberg and other economic channels, and op-ed writers, and the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they're all representing business interests that profit from the trade imbalance with China. Again, you and I don't, as people in the street, but they don't care. Wall Street does not represent our interests.
No.
So Trump is using economic leverage on China. And what happens? Suddenly North Korea is willing to discuss its nuclear program for the first time ever.
Yep.
Ever.
North Korea, China's junkyard dog.
Exactly. Reagan couldn't get him to do it. The Bushes, Clinton, Obama, nobody could get North Korea to sit down at the table. Now,
why? Because we have been courting China since Richard Nixon.
Exactly. And it's to benefit multinational corporations, not to benefit Main Street America, but to benefit the multinational corporations. So Trump and his team understand the economic leverage.
Yeah. By the way, you and I were talking about China and the whole trade imbalance and how China might react to that. One of the things that China has going for it is that they have big stake in Africa. Africa is where the rare earth metals are mined.
That's true.
Those are necessary for your handheld devices.
Exactly. That is one thing that Russia does hold. They've got rare earth metals that we here in the U.S. do not.
They do. We don't have, I don't know that we have any here in the United States, but if we do, they will suddenly become very, we're keeping it quiet if we do. But here's the thing, and this is what I predict. Watch Africa.
Yeah.
Because we have been going toe-to-toe with China in Africa nations already, because we're trying to get access to the stuff in the ground. Think of Africa as a big shopping center.
Yes, for raw materials.
Because that's how oligarchs see it.
Yeah.
So,
And they have since, for over 200 years.
Oh, yeah, easily. As long as it's been around. In fact, during the late 17th century, there was the French and Dutch and English were fighting over Africa then.
Right. And some of the earliest Dutch settlers in South Africa arrived in the 1670s, I think.
Yeah, why do you think so many African countries speak French?
And still use the franc as a... In fact, some of the emails released through WikiLeaks showed that was one of the reasons that the United States supported the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. It's because Gaddafi had put out a new dinar that he wanted to become the standard currency for northern African nations. And the French, Nicolas Sarkozy, did not want that.
Sarkozy. It's been a while since we...
Yeah. So anyway, but you're right. The rare earth metals are one thing that China does have. So you're right. Africa could become a point of contention because we've got a strong military presence there, as does China.
Mm-hmm. And remember, too, that Apple
presence.
is trying to bring its manufacturing home.
Back to the United States.
And the only way they can do that is if they have the raw materials to do it here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is one thing that China does have. But bottom line is they depend more on access to the American market than we need to buy their stuff. And everything we're buying from China, we could make here. It's just we'd have to pay more for it.
Yeah.
But the money would be going into the pockets of our neighbors rather than into the pockets of the Chinese government, which is what's going on.
That's typical world economics.
But the whole point of all this is that a week before last, on a Thursday, President Trump, at a speech during his infrastructure week in Ohio, told a crowd, we're getting out of Syria. We're getting out very soon. It's cost us $7 trillion. Others can take care of it now. Now, presumably by others, he means Russia or Saudi Arabia or both.
I don't think we're getting out. Let me just read to you what he tweeted today.
Mm-hmm.
Many dead, including women and children, in mindless chemical attack in Syria. Area of atrocity is in lockdown and encircled by Syrian army, making it completely inaccessible to outside world. President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing animal Assad.
Yeah.
Big price to pay, he continues in the next tweet. Open area immediately for medical help and verification. Another humanitarian disaster for no reason whatsoever. Sick, he continues. If President Obama had crossed his stated red line in the sand, the Syrian disaster would have ended long ago. Animal Assad would have been history.
Okay, well, this is a big game changer. But here's the thing. As with Obama's red line, which he refused to cross after a gas attack or a chemical attack was used, and it was never shown that it was the Assad government that did it. It was more likely, in fact, it was shown, the evidence suggested that it was rebels themselves because the rocket that was launched came from an area that was not under control of the Assad government at the time. Who benefits? As with any situation on the ground, who benefits? Trump, a week ago Thursday, and then on Friday, he reportedly confirmed to his staff, yes, I'm serious. We are getting out of Syria. We've got a couple thousand troops on the ground there, plus contractors and probably some other, forces that we're not even aware of, spies and CIA types and whatever. But the neocons last weekend went berserk in the media. Mm-hmm. This just shows that there is total chaos inside the White House, chaos in our Syria policy. No, this isn't chaos. This is Trump actually saying, I'm going to do what I promised to do during the election, which is get us out of Syria.
Yes, but if you look at it, I'm sorry, that's probably where you're going.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I was just going to say that this essentially allows the people who want us to stay there to go to the president and say, see, this is why we have to be there. We have to take out this guy. Right.
So the question is, who benefits from this? Would the Assad government benefit right after the president of the United States said, look, we'll get out?
No.
We'll get out. We'll let the Russians who were invited in by Assad. We've not been invited in. We are there essentially as an invasion force. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is not how our major media ever portrays us there.
We're there as liberators.
We're there to spread democracy, whether they want it or not.
So are the people coming across the border in the caravan, are they here? They coming to spread, I don't know, whatever it is they spread?
It's another invasion force is what it is.
Yes.
If people are in your country without your invitation, it is an invasion.
Technically an invasion. Yes, it is.
But our media never reports our presence in Syria that way, nor does it ever report the fact that if the Obama administration had not sent weapons to support the so-called moderate rebels back in 2012, 2013, ISIS would never have arisen in the first place.
Right.
We are responsible for ISIS just like we created the Taliban in the 80s in Afghanistan.
Now, mind you, when we say we, it does not necessarily mean the person sitting inside the Oval Office.
No.
That person is temporary.
Yeah.
It's actually the oligarchs who control our country and our foreign policy.
Right.
The rich folks.
Mm-hmm. Well,
not you and I.
Mr. Trump has been, President Trump has been doing the best he can to try to drain the swamp. What he is hearing right now from His advisors may have led him to conclude that the Assad government is responsible for this. I just don't see any logic behind the Assad government using gas at this point. Assad is essentially won. I mean, he has essentially defeated the rebels.
Yeah.
But
this comes at on the heels, a few weeks after this whole Russia thing in Great Britain. Mm-hmm. We are seeing the lead up to we're going to move away from a proxy war to a real war with Russia if we are not careful.
Yeah, I think you're right. The neocons in the deep state are not going to give up quite so easily. Again, their response in the media last weekend was evidence of that, as they were just shrieking at this irresponsible foreign policy. ISIS will return if we... Yeah, they wouldn't have been there in the first place if it hadn't been for the previous administration or the policies that occurred during the previous administration. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Because again, these policies were... the groundwork was laid during the George W. Bush administration.
Oh, exactly.
Obama was just Bush too, and it's not because they...
And it's not just Bush, it's also Clinton. I mean, it has nothing to do with the label that you wear with regard to party. It has everything to do who pays for your campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And getting back to the oligarchs. Yeah. An oligarchy, if you are not familiar with the word, is another type of political structure that means that large companies run it.
Mm-hmm.
So the oligarchs are the men and women behind the large companies. We speak about it over here all the time, saying Russia's an oligarchy, which means that the rich guys run the country.
Yeah, what do you think?
Putin's one of the rich guys.
Yeah.
Because he keeps putting the other rich guys in prison, taking all their stuff.
And they keep having accidents, falling down.
Feel terrible about it.
Like that guy in Washington Hotel in D.C.
Most countries are run by rich people.
Sure.
It's a corporate world.
Mm-hmm. So the eastern city of Douma, D-O-U-M-A or D-H-O-U-M-A, was the city where this attack took place. And, of course, it's the people on the ground who are suffering. Because we're the ones who pay the price. What's the old saying? When elephants fight, it's the ants who get trampled.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's going on here. Douma is the name of the city. It's in eastern Ghouta, G-H-O-U-T-A, in Syria, a rebel-held town. But again, it just doesn't seem like the Assad, that Bashar Assad would be stupid enough to risk U.S. intervention at the time when the U.S. is saying, when Trump has publicly said, hey, we're going to pull out, we're going to get out. Now suddenly he's going to do a 180, and Russia, meanwhile, is saying that there will be a grave response if the U.S. launches any kind of a strike against Syria. So, pray that cooler heads prevail, because it seems like, every time things are about to calm down, something like this happens to kind of it pours gasoline on the fire.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's a crazy world. We are heading toward a prophetic ending that Lord told us about a long time ago.
And maybe it was as simple as this. Maybe that because of what happened in the UK over this past week, where the whole Russia narrative there began to fall apart, that they needed to throw more gasoline on the fire to make Russia look like the evil empire again.
You may have hit up on it. If you're not following this, this has to do with the attack on, what was the name of the father?
Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia.
Yeah, and Yulia started recovering about a week and a half ago. Sergei is now listed as recovering. Mm-hmm. More and more stories are coming out about this, and they don't add up.
No. A couple of weeks ago, Prime Minister May and Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson said unequivocally, Russia's behind this. Boris Johnson actually went so far as to tell the press that experts at Porton Down, which is the big chemical
research lab,
had confirmed to him that Russia was behind it. And this past week, the head of Porton Down said, no, we can't identify positively where this nerve agent called Novichok came from. And the Russian ambassador to the UN gave a speech where he basically said, look, we don't own the exclusive copyright on Novichok. There are other places that can make this.
Yeah.
So, Boris Johnson was kind of left twisting in the wind out there by the head of Porton Down. who said, we didn't say what Johnson said we said.
Well, it was the strangest thing. For the first few days, we were told, we know what the agent is. We're not going to tell you its name, but we know what it is. Mm-hmm. We know how they were attacked. We're not going to tell you how we know that or how they were attacked, but we know. And it's over the next few days, it became clear that they didn't really know how they were attacked. Mm-hmm. Originally, they were attacked in the street. Then, no, it was in the restaurant. Finally, last week, someone's put something on the handle of the door into their flat. Mm-hmm. What? They were at their flat a long time before they were found, in the street after exiting a restaurant. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. The story keeps getting twisted around, and I agree. I think it's falling apart. As to what really happened, we may never know.
Never really know, yeah. So those are the series of events here. So you got the poisoning, the claims that Russia is responsible. The evidence begins to emerge. Not quite so clear. President Trump at first participates in the mass ejection of Russian diplomats from the United States. We closed the consulate in Seattle. Russia retaliates, sends 60 American diplomats home, closes the St. Petersburg consulate. Then the president calls Mr. Putin and raises the possibility of a meeting at the White House.
Yeah.
Which, of course, the deep state just, what? And now suddenly this claim of responsibility in Russia to this horrific chemical attack in a rebel-held town in Syria, and the President Trump holding Russia and Syria responsible.
Exactly. At the same time, I'm laughing as you were saying that. I'm looking at Sputnik News, and they have an article that just was posted going on and on about the dark side of the UK's Porton Down lab revealed.
So somebody's upset at Porton Down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At Sputnik News. Now, when I went to
gotcha. Okay.
Sputnik, so when I went to Sputnik, I get this pop-up that says, do you want push notifications from Sputnik? Except in nice orange block or in gray, refuse. I refused.
Yet. Da or niet?
I thought, usually accept or no thanks. Refuse? Mm-hmm. Suddenly, Russians are pounding on our door. Oh, good grief. Well, Sputnik is one of those useful websites that...
It's good to know what
hurls mud at
what they're thinking, too. Mm-hmm. Now, all of this is going on. Meanwhile, there was a fire at Trump Tower Friday night.
Yes.
The 50th floor of Trump Tower, and one person dead, several firefighters injured in this.
Was it Friday or Saturday?
Ooh, I thought it was Friday night.
Well, I'll have to look again. I saw the story this morning.
No, Saturday night. You're correct. Saturday evening. A resident there at the tower dead. Apparently, apartment fire at Trump Tower. Just odd that this was taking place at about the same time the chemical attack was taking place in Syria, and probably a coincidence.
Yeah, I have no idea what is happening here. With regard to the news that I see, I'm just looking at the variety of headlines regarding this fire, and several of them list in the headline, no sprinklers, no sprinklers, no sprinklers. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. The toughest part about putting it at this fire, and kudos to the firemen who responded, because it was on the 50th floor, and you have to disable the elevators
right
when there's a fire.
Yeah. So these guys had to go running up 50 flights of stairs in order to get there.
Yeah. In heavy suits.
Yeah. So thankfully it was confined, and just the one tragic death, a 67-year-old man, but several firemen injured in keeping this knocked down. But yeah, apparently, according to reports here, and again, bear in mind the media's got a certain agenda when it comes to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Trump Tower floor where a man was killed in a blaze didn't have sprinklers, a requirement Trump once fought. Well, there may be something more than something more nuanced than that particular statement. But again, just odd that this took place at the same time that this stuff was happening over in Syria that prompted President Trump's rather angry response.
Well, spiritually speaking, the fallen realm want to make sure that the world moves ever, forward towards a new world order. And keeping us fighting one another, tribe against tribe, is a really good way to bring order out of chaos.
Right. You got to have the chaos first. Yeah.
Which is chaos magic, which you and I talked about on a recent Sci Friday, but we've not talked about on PID radio.
No, that's true.
And it's a big topic that we'll have to actually have a separate PID radio where we discuss that. We also just recently on Sci Friday, in case you missed it, talked about the Montauk Project.
Yeah. That was it's an interesting bit of urban legend isn't quite right, but
it's definitely conspiracy theory.
Modern conspiracy theory. It's an air base that was used until when was that closed? 80s?
84 was
84?
the official closure date.
Okay. And it wasn't long after that stories about Montauk, Camp Hero, began to emerge. It's connected in some ways to the Philadelphia experiment, which was really the first aspect of the larger Montauk Project that came out. But the Montauk Project allegedly involved experiments on children for parapsychological abilities, telekinesis, telepathy. But then it involved other things too, mind control.
Well, there were experiments really taking place like that, not far from D.C. I mean, look at the Remote Viewers program.
Yeah, I was down at Camp Benning, or was that Camp... I'll have to look at that up. Men Who Stare at Goats. John Ronson, who wrote the book, it kind of played for comedy in the film version.
The book is not a comedy.
No. Although Ronson writes with a comic style, and he's quite a gifted writer, but this was where Colonel Jim Channon...
Well, it was done at SRI in California.
Stanford Research Institute, but then also Fort Meade, Maryland.
That's it, Fort Meade, that's it.
The 1st Earth Battalion Operations Manual of Colonel Jim Channon, which I have a copy in PDF somewhere.
Yeah. By the way, Harold Putoff was a part of this.
Albert Stubblebine, Jim Channon, of course.
Isn't Putoff part of the...
Hal Putoff is one of the...
Stargate Project or whatever it is?
He was, part of the Stargate Project research, which was taking place at Stanford Research Institute. That was remote viewing. But he's part of the group at To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences.
That's what I wanted to say.
Which is the group headed up by Tom DeLonge, the former lead singer of Blink-182. They are promoting the idea that we need to get involved in all kinds of fringe, let's say cutting-edge scientific research. But part of that research includes consciousness, which is a new age term. Essentially, it's the type of work that the Institute of Noetic Sciences does. As our friend Dr. Michael Bennett refers to it, it's researching scientific ways to become demonically possessed.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out how to contact the spirit realm using science. So, there are a number of projects that the United States government has been involved in since World War II. To try to weaponize the occult realm, to weaponize the supernatural against our enemies. The Men Who Stare at Goats is kind of a funny-sounding title. The book cover looks humorous. You've got these rifles all pointing at this helpless-looking goat. It refers to an experiment in which soldiers tried to exercise telekinetic power by staring at a goat and willing its heart to stop.
Which sounds crazy, but... we weren't the only country doing research like that at the time.
No, Russia was doing it as well, probably the Chinese, but certainly the Russians were. But the Montauk Project, the work that took place there was written up, let's say, and I believe, based on the evidence, that much of it was, say, a fanciful account, shall we say, by a fellow named Preston Nichols.
Well, yeah, honestly, I have to wonder why, and again, let's get to the spirit realm.
Right.
Why do they want us to believe things like this take place?
Yeah. It's a misdirection play. In the book that Josh and I wrote, we looked at, The Day the Earth Stands Still. We looked at how the government's intelligence operatives kind of shaped the narrative in certain in some of the high-profile UFO cases of the past, like Roswell. We didn't go in depth. That there are other books that have covered those topics much better than we did, but just showing that there's been an intelligence community presence in the UFO, the field of UFO studies since 1947, right from the very beginning of the modern UFO era.
Yeah.
And the same thing holds true with the Montauk Project, with the Paul Benowitz affair, which spawned the story, untrue, that there's an underground base at Dulce, New Mexico. Things like that. So the government has a vested interest in lying in order to cover up what it's doing, because either they don't want the public to know what it's doing, or they don't want the public to know what it's doing so that we don't spill the beans and tell the Russians and the Chinese what it's doing. But the spirit realm has a similar vested interest in misdirecting the public, misdirecting.
They do. And honestly, if you find this sort of information and these claims interesting, we highly recommend you read. It's written by a non-Christian. In fact, he's openly a pagan and an atheist. Peter Levenda wrote Sinister Forces. It's a trilogy of books that get into the secret formula behind all of this and takes a look at it. We often say it's the 6 degrees of Charlie Manson.
Charlie Manson, yeah.
Because nearly everything connects to him in some way.
Mm-hmm. He is definitely a theist. He's just not
that's right. Not an atheist. But he believes in magic and all sorts of stuff. In fact, he's a big Aleister Crowley fan.
Yeah, and Kenneth Grant as well.
Yes.
He is... He did tell me once privately that the OTO, which was the organization founded by Crowley, couldn't plan a box lunch.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, but he did seem to have, and reading between the lines of his book, The Dark Lord, which was about the worship of the chaos god Set, or a magical system anyway, built around venerating Set that was developed by Kenneth Grant. He seems to have quite a bit of respect for Grant and his magical system, and thinks that that is something that we should prepare for. And he told me in one interview that with proper preparation and purification and practice, you can access the
isn't that Typhonian magic and getting into chaos magic?
Yes, it is. Exactly right. Chaos. Typhon was the Greek god of chaos. Set was the Egyptian god of chaos. Now, just for the record, in case you're new to PID Radio, we disagree with Peter's worldview.
Exactly, we do. But
Christians. I hope the correct sense of the word is we understand that salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Jesus Christ alone. But that doesn't mean that Peter's research into the occult realm and the connections between various strains of occult teachings is invalid. It just means you have to factor his worldview into processing his information.
We believe first and foremost in reading God's word and understanding it. But a lot of what's in God's word is about the war with the fallen.
Right.
And there are references to things done by those who worship the fallen, practices that are forbidden by God. In fact, on today's Gilbert House Fellowship, we talked about the beads that were worn on the wrist.
Wristbands.
Your wristbands.
Like something like charm bracelets.
Exactly. Or worry beads, which you sometimes see. We didn't talk about those. But they were forbidden, and it was a practice that the Israelites were mimicking. They were still doing the things that their neighbors were doing, the neighbors who were worshiping pagan small g gods. Mm-hmm. And Derek and I, the reason we call it PID is because it's peering into darkness, because we believe our job, our calling on the front lines is to be spies. Mm-hmm. We want to understand what the enemy's doing. The only way to do that is to read the books written by those who follow the enemy's plan.
Right. And, like Paul wrote, we are not ignorant of the enemy's devices. We are not ignorant of the enemy's schemes, and we're trying not to be ignorant of the enemy's schemes.
It helps us to be discerning.
Yeah. So anyway, we look at stuff like this, like the Montauk Project, like what's coming in the media, and trying to sift through the spin of the media, because they're representing their own financial interests. The people who own most of the major media companies have certain financial interests affected by our foreign policies. The spirit realm has its own particular direction. Or say entities within the spirit realm have their own interests that they're trying to serve by guiding public discourse, by guiding the conversations that we have, by guiding what people believe, by putting certain memes into circulation that will deceive even the elect if it were possible, according to Scripture. That, we are coming on a day when the enemy will put out a lie that is so convincing that a lot of people who are not well grounded in Scripture will fall for it. Whether that happens before or after the church is called home to the rapture, we don't know. Don't know. But look, if you're on a battlefield and you're facing an enemy who wants to condemn your soul and the souls of your family, friends, for all of eternity, wouldn't you want to be prepared and have some idea of what that enemy's trying to do so you can prepare against it?
Yeah.
And prepare your family against it? And that's what we're called to do as Christians.
Amen to that. Well said.
Not to hide in the sand. So anyway, the Montauk Project, interesting stuff. That Philadelphia experiment where supposedly a USS destroyer escort, the USS Eldridge, was supposedly sent forward in time 40 years to Norfolk, Virginia, and then back again, and sailors were killed and disfigured and went crazy. And so, according to the actual evidence, and this was pulled together by Jacques Vallée, who's not a Christian, so it's not like he's approaching this from a worldview that wants to reject this kind of science. He is a mathematician and a scientist by training. He published a paper in a scientific journal analyzing the Philadelphia experiment as, what do you call it, an analysis or anatomy of a hoax, and the elements of the hoax that made it such an appealing lie. Because even in the face of evidence that debunks the Philadelphia experiment, the story continues. And there are still people out there who believe it. But, the Roswell incident, nobody, that's been the most thoroughly researched UFO incident in all of history. And yet no one has come forward with any artifact that can be conclusively shown to be extraterrestrial in origin. By now, somebody would have found something.
Something.
Yeah.
Snacks,
Something, yeah. But of course, to people who want to believe there's something more out there, the lack of evidence is evidence of the cover-up. So the lack of evidence is evidence of the event. And you cannot argue somebody out of that point, of that kind of worldview. There are other issues that we run, like the whole, Mandela effect thing. You cannot argue somebody out of that worldview if they're really convinced that history's been changed. And I know Berenstein Bears was spelled this way. You cannot convince me otherwise. Okay, fine. I'm moving on because, frankly, this.
Let's face it, it's an artificial intelligence that's just messing with you.
Exactly. And it's probably called AM, and it's going to, destroy the world. So just be prepared to go. Reference to Harlan Ellison there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Great story, by the way. I have no mouth and I must scream.
It will keep you up all night, though.
It will indeed.
Freaky, creepy.
So what else has happened since we had PID radio several weeks ago?
Well, let's see. Facebook still kind of in the crosshairs. I just got to wonder, what did Mark Zuckerberg do to tick off the oligarchs?
That is a very good question because he's getting slammed left and right.
Yeah.
In fact, there are rumors that he's no longer head of the company. Don't know if that's true or not. Also in the news just in the last couple of days was the attack on Google. A young woman who just decided she'd had enough and went over and started shooting up.
At YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, at YouTube, which is owned by Google. She was angry because her views on her YouTube videos were not getting as much attention as they were.
Their algorithms had somehow changed, and her stuff had been demonetized and stuff like that. And so she was upset and went in there and started shooting, and then took her own life before she could be brought into custody.
Yeah.
So,
which is really interesting when you think about it, because think about this. If your income model is based solely upon uploading videos to a quote-unquote free website where they host your sometimes thousands of videos and stream them without charging you a penny and pay you, isn't that kind of crazy when you get mad and say, well, how dare you not pay me for this?
Exactly, it is. And I know that there have been Christians who have gone very public with criticism of YouTube because they've demonetized their videos or shut down a channel or whatever. But, look, it's YouTube is not a public utility. Facebook is not a public utility. Twitter, Google, they are not public utilities. They're privately owned corporations. And if you're going to put content on their servers, you're going to post stuff on Twitter on their servers, then they have the right to do with your stuff whatever they want. I mean, free speech, nothing. I mean, if I'm going to allow people to, say, put signs in my front yard, if somebody puts a sign out there that I disagree with, well, okay, this is my yard. I'm going to go take down that sign.
Yes, exactly. And not only do they want you to leave the signs in your yard, they also want you to pay them for putting them up.
Yeah, for putting up such a wonderful sign. Look at how much traffic it's creating. Well,
every car that goes by, I'm going to give you a penny.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised that this is taking place. I think the whole point of getting the content on YouTube for Google was to draw eyeballs, and of course now they're trying to sell everybody subscriptions to their
to Redbox or whatever it's called.
RedTube or whatever they're calling it. the free cable TV.
It's Red, maybe it's just Red. I don't know what it is,
Red,
but
So all right, fine, that's fine. Just be prepared. If you're a Christian, your content, if you've got it hosted at YouTube, is on a server that is belongs to a company whose, if you've been paying attention to what's going on inside of Google at all, is run by people whose worldview is about 180 degrees opposite of your own.
People who are trying to create a genuine artificial intelligence that is sentient. They really are. And they are using every keystroke, every photo, every post to train it.
So once they no longer have a use for your Christian content, it will probably disappear.
Yeah.
And we kind of talked about this at Skywatch TV because all of our stuff there is at YouTube.
But it's also elsewhere.
Because we have had to post it elsewhere in order to power the Roku channel and the Apple TV channel. I've been posting some videos for View from the Bunker, but frankly, if those went away, it doesn't really matter because the podcast is all audio anyway, and we're paying for that to be hosted somewhere else. Now, if you were posting and stuff, rather paying to have stuff hosted somewhere, as long as it doesn't violate a terms of service agreement, like you're openly advocating violence or you're openly promoting activity that's illegal, say, then they really don't have any right to censor your stuff if you're paying a company to host your stuff. But when you're putting it somewhere free like YouTube, just expect it's going to happen at some point and make a contingency plan now. Now, I know Josh Peck hosts a lot of his stuff, his videos at, DTube, which I think is associated with Steemit.
Yeah,
I think the video portion of that is called DTube. But the question is, do you know if DTube's going to be around in a year or two? I don't know.
Here's the thing. Take advantage of Mars Hill while it's there.
Right.
That's it.
But don't be surprised when somebody pushes you off Mars Hill because your worldview is contrary to their own. I mean, okay, again, It's their yard. You're putting signs in their yard. If they want to take down those signs.
Does this look like 8 ounces?
It's their yard. Now, the interesting thing about Zuckerberg and Facebook is that I think it may relate to this Cambridge Analytica deal where Cambridge Analytica
I think so too.
mined the information, and the Trump campaign was smart enough to use that information to try to, for its campaign. Now, having said that, it also came out that the Obama campaign in the 2012 election was given access to a lot of Facebook data that the Republicans didn't get, and that Facebook allowed the Obama campaign to scrape data that they would not allow anyone else. Facebook didn't allow anyone else to scrape because they supported the Obama campaign.
When is he testifying?
He's testifying to the House this coming week. He's going to testify before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. But Zero Hedge points out, and I love Zero Hedge as a website because they basically skewer both sides, left and right, pointed out that there are 55 members on this committee, and Facebook has donated a cumulative $381,000 to 46 out of the 55 members on the committee. So he's testifying to a company, and he's basically contributed to the campaigns of 80% of the Congress people.
That would be called bribing the judge.
Yeah, it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
It'd be a very empty room if they all recused themselves from this meeting. But Yeah, it's interesting that Facebook seems to have crossed a line somewhere. Maybe it's related to Trump winning the campaign. Maybe it's, I don't know. There may be something going on behind the scenes where Zuckerberg didn't want to play ball. Or maybe he's getting too big for his britches and they're wanting to take him down a peg. Or maybe the product has reached the full flower of its bloom and now the intelligence communities want to harvest the seed that they've planted.
I think you finally hit on it. It's been around long enough that it's provided all the data that their little data centers can chew on.
Mm-hmm.
We're done.
Yeah. Or we now need to take it over and make it a public utility.
Suddenly, the scene from Close Encounters, where the poor organist is trying to keep up with the spaceship.
Yeah.
No, we'll let the computer take over from here. Oh, thank you.
So anyway,
I don't know. It's a crazy world.
Yeah. There was an interesting video that went viral last week, and I put it on one of my reports at Skywatch TV this past week. I don't know if you saw this video, but it was put together by the video director of a sports video website called I can't remember what it is, but Deadspin. It's video of dozens of local television news anchors all reading very somberly this editorial piece about the dangers of false news and what a danger it is to our democracy.
Because it's dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, it's biased false news.
Dangerous.
Factually unchecked. Yeah, you just watch out for the dangerous danger because it's perilous.
So is this parody?
No, this really happened. The Sinclair Broadcast Group owns
no relation to Charles Sinclair.
No. Yes, Charles Sinclair, totally not connected. Sinclair Broadcasting owns 193 television stations around the United States.
Yeah, they own a huge percentage.
They're the largest.
Yeah,
the largest ownership of television broadcast stations in the country, and they reach into 40% of American homes. So they've got a huge reach.
But they're relatively conservative.
That is why
the problem.
The media went berserk when this came out last week. Last weekend, video went viral of all these news anchors reading this script word for word. Here at Channel 4, 12, 16, 27, 33, we're happy to serve the Eastern Arizona, Western Iowa, Northern Nevada community. And it's funny when you watch it, but it is chilling at the same time when you see all of these news anchors standing there with their perfectly coiffed hair and beautifully lit, and in some cases, women have had some work done. It's just news needs to be, we're here to present the final, but this fake news being spread through social media is unchecked, and people are like, and it's a danger to our democracy. And they close this video with about 8 different people saying this is dangerous for our democracy. This is a danger to our democracy. This is dangerous for word.
So who wrote the script?
Well, it came from the headquarters at Sinclair Broadcasting. And all the local stations were basically told, you will read this verbatim on your evening newscast. And so, but somebody caught that this was going on, and they got video from dozens of these Sinclair stations and put it all together in one video. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. If you haven't seen it yet, it's worth watching because it does make a point. And this is the result of the deregulation that took place during the Reagan years. When I got into broadcasting in 1980, broadcasters could only own.
Really old.
Yeah, I am. Broadcasters could only own. Back in the day, we had to crank up the the generator by hand.
Radio was still done by stone when I.
Yeah,
that's why the Rolling Stones were so big.
Out, yeah.
Morse code.
we had to build a fire. We had a blanket. We had smoke signals up into the air. A broadcaster could only own 7 AM stations, 7 FM stations, and 7 television stations total. In their entire portfolio of broadcast operations, that was maximum. 21 stations, 777. But that was deregulated during the Reagan years. And now you've got radio companies that own 1,800 radio stations apiece. And in the case of Sinclair, they own 193. And if the FCC approves a deal that's on the table, they will own another 40 stations here shortly. So this, has a point. But the problem, or rather the irony of all this is that the media just now noticed that this is a thing. I mean, they only just now noticed this because the ownership of Sinclair Broadcasting is pro-Trump.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. By the way, they're defending their promotional message that was read by local anchors.
Yeah. The funny thing, so this is their fake news editorial, and progressives are pointing out the editorial is fake news because it's a fake editorial that all these stations are reading exactly the same thing word for word.
But honestly, that's not unusual. It's not unusual at all for someone at the very top of an organization to say, I want everybody to follow this do this or read this.
Exactly. That's the irony here, is that that's exactly what goes on in MSNBC and CNN and Fox News. It's just that you've only got one network there, and instead of 193 local television stations all reading the same script the same way, and all these local news anchors, giving it their best read. It's almost like watching auditions for a part in a play. Okay. Let's have the Asian female read it. Okay, now let's have the white guy read it. Now let's have the African-American woman read it. It's just, it's funny. But this is not new. I mean, the fact that this is news is startling. Mm-hmm. And it's only because, again, it's pro-Trump media that progressives are calling it out. 5 years ago, the Conan O'Brien show had a regular feature on his program called The Real News, or Newscasters Agree, I think was the name of the bit, where they would show like a dozen or so local newscasters from around the country reading the same news package exactly the same way. Yes. Well, if you buy gas for your car, you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are on the rise. Gas prices are on the rise. Gas prices are on the rise. It's funny. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they're just now noticing this is like, okay, where have you been?
Yeah.
Oh, it's because it didn't serve your interests to point out the fact that local news is being scripted from...
Has been all along.
Right. The editorial doesn't bother me. The fact that we were getting these same stories on things like gas prices, the evils of, burning fossil fuels or whatever. Everybody needs to get a vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That's still playing. Measles.
Exactly.
Look at the stories around measles.
Right.
Measles has been around forever. It's not that dangerous, and yet it's being played as the new smallpox.
Yes. And a lot of these local news operations who are strapped for cash, they get a slickly produced news package from some organization. Sometimes these are coming from advocacy groups for Big Pharma or Wall Street or whatever, the tech industry. Send them these packages, and so the local anchor reads the wrap around the produced package, and then they just run the video in the middle. So you're getting the same thing, but in the body of the newscast, and we have been for years. It's just the media only noticed now because it's an editorial from a pro-Trump broadcaster.
Yep, you got that right.
So the point of all this, the takeaway is use your brain regardless of where you get your news, because the last defense between fake news and your life is between your ears.
Well said.
Thank you.
Well said. There's your sound bite right there. And speaking of biting...
Sam Doxson just entered the room.
Hi.
Right on time.
He says, you guys are done. Just stick a fork in you. You're done.
Well, speaking of Montauk, which we talked about earlier.
Montauk Talk?
Yes, Montauk Talk. The Hear the Watchman Conference. The second one for 2018 will be near Montauk, Long Island. And
yes, indeed. And which means that those folks who've been complaining you never come to the East Coast, we're coming to New York, for goodness sake.
Yes, we are coming to Long Island, New York. This will be August 9th through 11th, with such speakers as Rabbi Zev Parat, Pastor Paul Begley, Carl Gallups will be there, L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Michael Lake will be there, and of course we will be there.
Coach Dave.
Coach Dave Dovenmeyer, Casper McLeod.
Henry Groover.
Henry Groover coming back. That's going to be awesome. Henry is such what a gentle spirit.
I love the picture that they use here that says Derek Gilbert underneath. I'm in the picture, so it's like you're a two-headed monster.
Part of the Montauk experiment. That was part of the Montauk Project. Let's see if we can. Let's just
Montauk
jam them together.
Monster.
Yes.
How funny. Well, we'd love to see you there if you live in the area, if you've always wanted to attend a conference, but because you live on the East Coast, you thought, okay, too expensive. Well, you need to do it. But on Sunday afternoon,
yes,
you'll get to tour the facility, not indoors necessarily, but the Montauk area. It's now park. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get as much done as possible. We'll have lunch. Who doesn't love a lunch?
Yeah. Now that's an additional fee above the convention registration, so that's an extra event
because they're having to lease a bus and provide the meals and everything. So it's extra, but it's worth it. How often are you going to get to do that?
Yeah. So we're definitely looking forward to that. If you want more information or to register for the Lifting the Veil conference, this is Hear the Watchman, Long Island, August 9th through 11th. It's hearthewatchman.com. hearthewatchman.com. And also on the East Coast, in October, we'll be coming to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's the East Coast Prophecy Conference from Southwest Radio Ministries. We're hitting all points on the compass.
We are. We just don't know where
we might even fly southwest. Or maybe we might fly northwest. We don't know.
Our old white dog who just constantly ran
in circles. Yeah, Murphy. God love him. So that will be October 18th through 20th at the Wyndham Gettysburg in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. But that will feature Tom and Joe Horn.
I know. How often you don't get to hear those two speak at the same conference, but mostly Tom Horn just doesn't accept invitations anymore.
No.
He gets invited all the time, but he's too busy with the ponies to do this.
Yeah.
By the way,
with Tom, playing the ponies is a different thing. That has nothing
totally
to do with the racetrack.
Trust me. No. If you want to go to Branson, Missouri to the Gen 6 conference, you've got to get your registration in soon.
Yes.
Not only because they're going fast, we only have 3,000 total. Last time I checked, we were well over halfway sold, and it's not until September. So you better get your registration in right away. But the hotels, they book up quickly. It's not just our conference meeting in Branson at that time.
Right.
And there are only so many hotels in a small town. If you want to be close to the event, sign up now.
Yeah, that's gen6.com, GENSIX.com. The True Legends Conference at the Mansion Theater in Branson, September 14th through the 16th of 2018. The conference title, Transhumanism and the Hybrid Age, featuring Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, Sharon K. Gilbert, Dr. Hugo DeGaris, Timothy Alberino, David Knight from Infowars.com, and more, gen6.com for that.
And you've talked with DeGaris before. He's this is what he does.
Yeah. He was head of the Artificial Brain Laboratory at Xiamen University in China. So, he's a world-renowned expert on this, but he's also the author of a book warning about the dangers of the transhumanist movement called the Art-elect War.
Yeah.
Artificial intellect.
It's a novel.
Art-elect War. Yeah.
So,
but,
good way to learn.
When you start using words like giga-death to describe the outcome of a war over artificial intelligence, you might want to listen.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, that's
another one in the books.
It is. Give us a like at iTunes or Stitcher or Spreaker, wherever fine podcasts are sold. And of course, you'll find the PID Radio group at Facebook, facebook.com/PID Radio.
Yep.
Until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening. PID Radio is a production of Gilbert House Ministries. The opening theme is adapted from The Alchemist's Tower by Kevin MacLeod, www.incompetech.com. The closing theme is Right Light by Joe Horn and Broken for Good. Find their album Right Where You Stand at Spotify and the iTunes Music Store. Our website is PIDradio.com, where you'll find the show notes, links to our personal websites, and links to connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The content of this program is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives 4.0 International License. For more information, see creativecommons.org.
I woke up this morning with some aching in my head. Darkness could have stuck around and filled my day with dread, but it's gonna be alright. Gonna be just fine for me. Turning on the right light is gonna set me free. This life seems way too willing to try and knock me down. I just know there's a way I can turn it all around. It's gonna be alright. Gonna be just fine for me. Turning on the right light is gonna set me free.